Castrillon. The market of meals and fat of animal origin has been positioning in the nutrition of some species. These represents a potential opportunity to make business for all companies. So we thank the presence of the next speaker, who will present some important data on this subject. So let's please receive her with a big applause. Hello, good morning to everyone. I hope that the graphics and the data are not too many and that you can visualize them properly. All right, so the current challenges to formulate diets to organisms or domestic species, it's the substitution of meals. And that's what we've been trying to do during the last years. I can choose oils to replace them, but we will always have to think in the benefit and the cost of the product. In that way, in which the fish meals and the fish oil that have increased their cost a lot in the last years, we can also see an increase in the prices of the production. And here we see the prices of shrimp in Mexico. So in order to foresee this, we need to have a very good margin of utility or have alternatives in a specific moment in time to be able to act accordingly. So to start, let's talk about the properties of the meal and the fish oil. Let's begin with the fish meal. It has always been considered as a high digestibility meal with many nutrients. But many times the manufacturers or the producers don't want to try or don't allow themselves the opportunity to depend on other sources different from the fish meal. And here we see the value that these proteins have. All of them are constituted by polypeptidic change. And we see that depending on the structure, we will have these amino acids that are part of the chain. And we see that the digestive enzymes are highly selective. So the one that's most related to digestibility in most of animal organisms, including humans, we see that trypsin, it will allow in the links along with lysina and chymotrypsin, which is the most important one. It also plays an important role in this process. So what does this mean? That depending on the quantity of these amino acids that we see in the polypeptidic change, then we will see what's the level of digestibility. We have here all the enzymes and their properties, especially the sensibility and selectivity to cut links. So between the alkaline digestion and the acid digestion, and we call it alkaline because it has a pH around 7. It's not so alkaline, but yeah. And then we have the exopeptidase that cut the links as well. And so in an organism, the digestion and absorption happen in the gut, and all the raw materials need to be digested in order to be absorbed and then to be reconstituted or go through the gut barrier into the blood to generate the fats. So the fatty acids are able to be absorbed in a free way to reconstitute again to form the chylomicrons, and this is done in the lymphatic system. So why is the digestibility different from the different proteic sources? We have another example here. We have chicken meal, fish meal, and these plant origin sources. And why does the digestibility decreases here? Well, it's due to the polypeptidic chains. Even if we see the profile of amino acids and we say, well, it's not too different, right? Well, here we see the periodicity of these amino acids that make that generate that the chains are not too long in order for all the enzymes to properly function. Here we can see the comparison of amino acids. This is the red line that shows it. And we see a comparison of the animal meals versus the fish ones. And we see that among the levels of meal, there is no significant difference. In lysine, there might be a decrease, but actually they are very similar. And so to substitute the meals, besides knowing their digestibility, we have to see the meal conversion, and the cost is also a very important factor. Also, Julieta talked a little bit about the digestibility. So we have to remember that when we talk about this, many times we don't know what people is actually delivering or what does that mean, digestibility. In almost always they show the pepsin digestibility, but they never say what method they used. Well, so this is the in vitro digestibility with the pepsin. We also have some methods in which some people that technically call them enzymatic cocktail. It's no longer pepsin digestibility. But we will also see that in vitro digestibility, they never tell us the concentration of the pepsin, the temperature, the time in which they carry that digestion, and that can throw very different data. And the results could be not replicable with different techniques. And we also have another problem in the aqua systems in which we have many problems in digestive systems, for example, in the shrimp. But we also see some fish that eat meat or algae, and they can have a very different digestive system. The apparent digestibility that you already know very well, because it's carried out also in many organisms, is a direct measure. Well, we say direct, but it's apparent, right? So here is a relationship between the feed that was consumed and the concentration of that marker. And in there you have a more accurate valorization. What about the fish oil? how do we substitute it? If we compare, and we have this list over here, I don't think you can see much, but we can see that we have the fish oils here. And if we see it like that, we can say, oh, the fish oil is really complete, right? And within this type of important ones, you have the PHA, and not even vegetal oils of animals can substitute it. And this has made that a lot of people think that the fish oil can't be replaced. And here we have the sources. Actually, this history from 2011 to 2022 of the oils that are used as a feeding source. And we see that this blue here, which is soybean, we can see how they have been using it much more. This is yellow fat from the corn oil. And the rest of them, yeah. So the increase of the utilization of plant-based oils is huge. And we see that is not only the best, is not always the best option. It's also really interesting to point out this graphic here. This is an evolution from 1990s up to the 2000 of the ingredients that are being used. So we have that the C products, which are the blue ones, it was used up to a 65% in 1900, and today it's a 10% only. So the formulas are each day more vegetal based.
And here we have the ingredients used. There's a publication in 2020 mentioning the proteins of the ingredients. So we see the reduction to 20%. And the maritime sources are in 8%. Now, if we see the comparison of the linoleic acid, which is omega-6, it's 18 carbon chain. As a important metabolites for the body. So this causes an irritation effect, production of an inflammatory process, which is no good for the bodies. But if we see the red part, they are all vegetables. 70% of the fatty acids are linoleic. So the sunflower is 68, corn 54, cottonseed 52, soybean 51, rice bran 33, and so on. The olive oil, then palm oil and all the animal fats, which have very low the coconut oil also. And then we can see the cost benefit. Doesn't mean everything is converted into fats or meals. We have to see the cost benefits. So a representation of the costs were the price per ton of fish meal. These are prices of December and January, last December and last January. So considering 100% fish meal, there's 42% of livestock, 18% pork, and soybean 23%. If we consider the concentrated or isolated, it would be higher. So translation apologizes, but the audio is very poor. We can't understand what the speaker is saying. It's very, very low. So we won't have the cost at 100% of fish oil. So poultry fat 21%, soybean 14, palm oil 14, and canola 17%. So for the replacement of fish meal, we did some assessments. We began with shrimps. So we used fish as an only source. The third is poultry, soybeans, and half of poultry, soya, and then half poultry, and we doubled the soya content. What we observed was the meaningful reduction in growth when we started using soybean. So it must be avoided. Nevertheless, the growth between fish meat and poultry meal, so we have to lower costs. We also did a trial with livestock meal, beginning with poultry meal. So we replaced until we got to 0% the poultry meal by livestock, by beef. We use the BHA concentrate. And here we saw for digestibility, and we saw that in case of the linoleic acid, from 13 to 8%, from 15 to almost 9%, and in DHA, well, in growth, the best growth was totally replaced by livestock, and this was a pleasant surprise. digestibility, we saw 85% of poultry. The smallest livestock increased the digestibility. And in the case of linoleic acid, we are delivering shrimp with a low level of linoleic acid. And we observe in DHA where the parameters, what we could say, there are differences in all, but the highest one was in livestock. Nevertheless, these high levels of free cholesterol, shrimps don't synthesize cholesterol. They are levels that are not reported. So it's within the normal levels. When you use meal, we use the same experimental design where we got to 0. Pork, using pork tallow. So here we see linoleic remains constant and DHA is the proper one. So here in growth, we observe a trend. Although there's no meaningful difference, nevertheless, there's a trend to better growth with livestock meal, and we see the fatty acids with no problem with the linoleic. Now here we find a reduction of digestibility that we haven't found. This assessment was done recently. We are trying to see the digestibility compensated with growth, probably meaning better digestibility. With fish, we did exactly the same design for experiment as with shrimp, and we see the same with fatty acids. And also we see that in growth in livestock, there is if there is meaningful differences, and the best is the one with low level, but we didn't see any meaningful differences in control. Nevertheless, we see a small reduction in digestibility. But in pork, with the same experimental design, we also see the largest growth in the ones with poultry with low level, and a third of pork, and then this was reduced. Well, this reduced growth. These are meaningful, but with more pork, digestibility was reduced. And here seeing digestibility for, there is a meaningful reduction, and the protein digestibility we found is reduced by 10%. And we are trying to see why, because growth wasn't reflected the same way as digestibility. In case of fish oil replacement, we did an experiment with tilapia, mixing poultry, palm, and DHA, and we replaced it with fish oil until we got to zero fish oil. These are the sources of saturated, high amount of. We see the linoleic of 7 below 13, and we see there was no parameter of growth with meaningful differences with any kind of replacement. With poultry fat in high concentration, there was no effect when DHA was present. And we also have linoleic here with good concentration, and it's low. So what can we conclude? The livestock meal is used efficiently with shrimps without any adverse effects for health. Pork meal is also used with efficiency, but we're doing more digestibility assessments. That's not bad because growth was better or there was a trend to increase digestibility. With tilapia, the pork meal is used with efficiency, especially with low replacement, and we need to have more digestibility assessments to see the effect in apparent digestibility that we thought might happen. As to replacement of fish oil, a mixture of 70% of poultry oil, more palm and DHA can be 100% replaced, can replace fish oil 100% without increasing linoleic acid. That's all. Thank you very much.